भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with the essence of the Maharshi Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, verses 36 to 38. Avachyavadancha bahun vadishyanti tava ahitaha nindantaha tava samadhyatataha दुःखतरं नुकिम् हतवा प्राप्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीं तस्मात् उत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततः युद्धाय युज्यस्य नय एवं पापम् avapyasi. This is the English translation. Your enemies will speak many ill words of you and will deride your strength. What great pain than this! Slain, you will reach heaven. Victorious, you will enjoy the earth. Therefore, O son of Kunti, stand up, resolved to fight. Having gained equanimity in pleasure and pain, in gain and loss, in victory and defeat, then come out to fight. Thus you will not incur sin. Let us recap the verse 35 where we left off. The great warriors will think you fled from battle out of fear, and they who held you in esteem will belittle you. Bhagavan now speaks to Arjuna of the great humiliation which is awaiting if he does not fight. Bhagavan is helping him to break through the state of suspension by raising points that will touch his heart and mind and induce him to fight. He is telling Arjuna exactly how he will be put to shame in the eyes of the world. Your enemies will speak many ill words of you and will deride your strength. What greater pain than this? In the following verse, Bhagavan shows Arjuna the rewards that fighting will bring him both in this life and hereafter. Now he is showing why he should perform the duty from the point of view of gain. Whether you die on the battlefield or whether you survive, you stand to gain, because by fighting in accord with the natural course of your evolution, and if you are established on that course, then you are automatically on the path of increasing fortune in this life and hereafter. Therefore, Arjuna, without losing more time, come, make up your mind to fight. In general, the teaching of the Sankhya Yoga has been associated as teaching with the life of the recluse only. This has been a misconception, and Bhagavan is here teaching the Samkhya on the most practical level of life. Bhagavan continues, having gained equanimity in pleasure and pain, in gain and loss, in victory and defeat, then come out to fight. Thus you will not incur sin. In this verse, Bhagavan is clearly saying to Arjuna, first rise to the wisdom of life given so far in the verses 11 to 37, and established in this wisdom, come out to fight. Thus you will not incur sin. Bhagavan is further telling Arjuna, do not waste any more time in the consideration of victory or defeat. Whatever the consequences, he should be prepared to fight, because at least one thing is certain: by fighting he will not incur sin. If on the other hand he refuses to fight, he is certain to fall into sin. Bhagavan says to him, I am not asking you to fight with a view to this or that loss or gain, but because by fighting you will not incur sin. Unfortunately, for the last few centuries, this part of Lord Krishna's teaching has been interpreted as indicating that a mood of equanimity should be cultivated during the experience of either loss or gain. And in fact, the Lord means that right or wrong, virtue or sin should be the primary consideration when deciding upon the validity of an action. It should not be decided on the basis of loss or gain. In judging the validity of an action, the first consideration should be its nature, whether or not it will be in any way be sinful. So again, the first consideration should be its nature, whether or not it is in any way sinful. and not decide on the basis of loss or gain. It is the purpose of the action that creates its need. Once the need for an action is felt, then the first step to make sure is that it is not in any way sinful. To consider the loss or gain is only the second step. Now, if this action is for leading to the fulfillment of one's mission in life, or if it is an action which would be sinful to leave undone, then its performance becomes a necessity. In such a case, the consideration of temporary loss or gain becomes all the more unimportant. You will not incur sin. This is the guarantee that the Bhagavan offers. One becomes uninvolved in sin as a result of having gained equanimity in pleasure and pain, in gain and loss, in victory and defeat. This state of equanimity is born of the wisdom so far given to Arjuna, starting from verse 11 onwards. The wisdom of Sankhya, as the Lord names it in the verse that follows. Now here, summing up the wisdom of Sankhya comprises, number 1, understanding of the perishable and imperishable phases of life, which is described in verses 11 to 30. Knowledge of the perishable and imperishable aspects of life broadens the vision and makes a man see beyond the mundane and limited sphere of daily life. Number 2, understanding of dharma, verses 31 to 33. When supplemented by knowledge of dharma, induces in him a natural tendency to act rightly. His life becomes more useful to himself and to others. Number 3, understanding of one's relationship with others, verses 33 to 36. Through the understanding of his relationship with others, he rises above selfish ends to more and more universal aspects of life. Number 4, understanding of the results of actions, verses 36 to 37. This growing universal outlook, enriched by the proper understanding of the results of action, helps a man to develop and make progress on all levels of life. And finally, number 5, understanding of the nature of the doer as uninvolved with action, giving rise to equanimity in loss and gain. So here, with the understanding of the nature of the doer as uninvolved, he gains equanimity. And this is how he gains the equanimity, by being the doer as uninvolved. He rises above the influence of dualities, lives a life free from sin and suffering, and enjoys eternal freedom. From the following verse, Bhagavan begins the teaching of yoga, whereby the mind will rise above the binding influence of action, and teaching whereby the intellect, cultured by the wisdom of Sankhya, will be eternally established in the oneness of life, in the oneness of absolute being, the eternal liberation in divine consciousness here and now. So here, yoga is for establishing the oneness in life, in the oneness of the absolute being, and bringing the eternal liberation in divine consciousness here and now. Here ends the essence of the verses 36 to 38, chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, Maharishi's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Now I would like to add a few words. I especially want to take a little time today and bring the importance of what Maharshi Ji has given in this path of bliss consciousness for attaining enlightenment. He taught the technique of transcendence, without which one will not be able to explore or research into the depths of your own self. I had always been a seeker from childhood, and when I came to US and learned TM and heard Maharishi say that in this life you can be enlightened, that was very connecting to my heart at that moment, because I was seeking enlightenment, not knowing really what it is. And when someone would say, yes, you can be enlightened in this one life, then I did not even doubt it. Before that, I would hear so many people saying how difficult it is to be enlightened and how difficult it is to practice sadhana. And all I was hearing was that it may not be possible in one lifetime even to attain enlightenment. With regular practice of TM and TM Siddhis, I made a lot of progress and had experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi and was growing into the cosmic consciousness, the self being more and more awake during the night and during the 24 hours. But then I was also working very hard, and that fatigue and stress was overshadowing the experience of the self. It was then that I decided to come to India and just stay with intense sadhana so that I would be fully enlightened. Maharishi Malayala Swami is our family guru for 4 generations, and so it has been very fortunate that I could do my intense sadhana or tapas in Tirumala, where Maharshi Malayala Swami himself did the tapas for 13 years. A very auspicious place indeed. But here I was surrounded by sannyasis. There were a few Vanaprastha sadhakas, but most of them were sannyasis. So I actually literally came as Vanaprastha sadhaka only, because I was still married, and it is only later in Rishikesh that I took sannyas. It is only after coming here and observing how the sannyasis and sadhus were doing their sadhana that I began to understand the differences, the different ways to realization. This realization of the self-realization and the God realization. It's only then I began to understand that what a blissful technique Maharshi Ji has given to achieve the goal. I have been in the company of very good and experienced sannyasis, and I never disturbed them and they never disturbed me. We just carried a lot of mutual love and respect in our hearts. Being a physician, I would always try to help out with their health concerns or problems. And the other devotees or some of the sannyasis would always tell me the stories of the great yogis and sadhus who have done penance in those regions. For how many years they did the tapas? 20 years, 10 years, 30 years, and how hard it was, and how many things they gave up, how they renounced and just lived on water, lived on air, put up with the harsh climate. And these were these constant stories that I would be listening. And maybe it would have been different if I didn't have my Nirvikalpa Samadhis already, and knowing and being the self already. Because it is so difficult, because it is so easy to be drawn into anything or influenced by any of the sayings, especially when people around you keep talking. But I stuck with my program, with what I was doing, and then I added Guru Puja and then Rudra Abhishekam every day, Puja to Shiva, to complete my day, and also to remove the many obstacles that would arise during such a great period of sadhana. It was interesting that on one of the walls near the caves where Maharishi Malayala Swami did his tapas, it was inscribed that if one sacrifices everything and then stays in tapas for 5 years, then one would be completely enlightened. Probably many people read that, but they would not take it to heart. But I took it to heart, and in 5 years I accomplished everything that was needed to be accomplished. Later on, I tried to see what Maharshi Ji has said about gaining the way of realization. So here is the summary. The characteristics of the ultimate reality are threefold. There is the characteristic of bliss happiness, and this true meditation is the means of reaching God through the bliss happiness, through this characteristic. This is clearly what Maharshi Ji gave us. As well, there are the characteristics of consciousness and absoluteness, both of which offer ways of realization, but the ways are different from the way of transcendental meditation. Now let us look at the way to realization through the absolute attribute of the divine. So here the absolute is understood as beyond relativity and is eternal. The field of relativity is fleeting, always changing, but the absolute never changes. So the path of realization through this attribute is the path of discrimination. It is the path of enquiry or vicharana. And this path is given to a sannyasi. A sannyasi is one who is recluse and has renounced the world. Now this sannyasi contemplates the transient, fleeting, evanescent nature of the world and concludes that except the ultimate reality, which alone is absolute and all else is relative. So this is the continuous discrimination of the self and the non-self. The establishment of this conviction, not only in the intellect but in the life and feelings, is achieved by 3 steps. And the first step is to listen to the master. And in this case, the master's teachings consist of explaining the futility, the evanescence and unreality of created things. The second step is to contemplate the permanence of the ultimate reality. And the third is to ask the question, when everything is impermanent, what is the essential nature of that which is permanent? So by this continuous inquiry and discrimination, the conclusion to this path leads to the expressed in the sentence that thou art all that, all this is nothing but that. Again, the path of discrimination leads to the sentence that thou art and all this is nothing but that. The approach to the divine through discrimination and analysis of the world leads to making the sannyasi nature part and parcel of the divine nature. Having established fully enough the conviction of the futility and the impermanence of manifested creation, the sannyasi's mind becomes free to rest on the I am, in which the am is his own being and is eternal and permanent. I would see them very focused in reading the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and whatever literature the Gurus have recommended, and continuously being in this discrimination of the self and the non-self. Now, the third way of realization through the consciousness is through the consciousness attribute of the divine. So first we have seen it is through the bliss consciousness, and second is through the absolute attribute, and the third is through the consciousness attribute. Here the consciousness refers to awareness, and this is developing the awareness of the whole, and leaving no aspect unknown. By the whole is meant the real nature of the unmanifest, and this is consciousness itself. So this consciousness as an awareness is an attribute that must be lived. If it is lived completely, nothing of the manifested world will be left unknown. So on the path to God through consciousness, consciousness is used to maintain self-consciousness or self-awareness. So how is this self-awareness maintained? Now, if you see a flower and it occupies the mind completely, the flower absorbs all there is of the mind. That means the mind is full of the flower. Thus, in the seeing of the flower alone remains and the experiencer is lost. This is total loss of the self. The way of consciousness demands that while experiencing the flower, the experiencer should simultaneously remain conscious of himself, so that the identity of the experiencer is not drowned in the experience. The essential technique of this process is that awareness should be lived. It should not be that the mind is divided into two, with one part seeing the flower and the other part separately concerned with maintaining awareness. Then it will be wrong. With such a division of the mind, it is not possible to achieve the real state of self-awareness. The most important thing here is the attainment of the true state of self-awareness is in fact dependent upon the experience of pure consciousness. Pure consciousness, which is the self alone. And if one has not reached, and if that has not happened, even if it is brief, the individual simply cannot know what it is that he is seeking to attain. So, before some experience of pure consciousness or samadhi has been gained, only the useless technique of mind division will be practiced. And this is so in spite of whatever the individual may think or imagine to the contrary. So without the experience of samadhi, self-awareness can only be self-delusion. So once a man has begun to live the true self-awareness, even if it is only to a small extent, he has embarked upon the way to God through consciousness. This path is properly called the path of Raja Yoga. It is very important in this path to understand that the process of living in self-awareness must be natural and spontaneous and must have grown from an initial glimpse of pure consciousness. Illusory self-awareness, which is based upon the act of dividing the attention, benefits nobody. In fact, it makes the mind dull. And if the practice is intellectually dividing the mind, and if this is carried on for any length of time, the man practicing it tends to become dull, with a dull mind, and the mind is pointing neither inwards nor outwards. That means he will not succeed in the world, nor he will attain the divine nature. So this path of Raja Yoga then amounts to a process of living, of being centered in the divine and the eternal silence. With the complete and permanent attainment of self-awareness, the state becomes part of the nature of the mind and is lived continuously throughout the 24 hours of the day. This does not stop the mind from appreciating the experiences of the objective world, but it prevents those experiences from having an unnecessarily deep and enduring grasp of the mind. So one cannot maintain this awareness just through intellectual discipline without having the experience of the pure consciousness during the samadhi. And awareness is not a thing that can be maintained from outside. It is not on a thinking level or on an imaginary level where one can start thinking that they are an extension of the universe to infinity and they are feeling the eternity, and this then becomes self-hypnosis. All the three paths lead to self-realization, but I saw several of the sannyasi and the sadhus actually practicing the absolute attribute of the divine and the consciousness attribute of the divine. So the two ways of the recluse are entirely unsuited to the worldly man or the householder and will only lead to distress and failure in life if they are attempted. And this is what Maharishi Ji has realized, and that's why he gave the bliss attribute. I realize clearly that what Maharishi Ji has given is the path, the pathless path through the bliss attribute of the divine. And this way it is of far greater interest because it is the way suited to the needs of the householder or who is in life, who accepts life and who perfectly naturally seeks success and fulfillment in life as well as to the attainment of consciousness. So then this is of great hope to people like me who have been had a family, had been in career and still wanted to be enlightened. Again, the path of discrimination through the absolute attribute is most unsuited to the householder because it involves a refusal to value worldly activities and rely upon the fact that transcendental happiness is a sure attraction and lure for the mind. Again, in the absolute attribute, It involves the refusal to value worldly activities and a rejection of worldly experience. So it cannot be suited to one who is trying to live a life. Then the path of consciousness attribute is also hardly more suitable for the householder than the other, because in order to live awareness as much as possible, it is necessary that the mind should not be engaged in the experience of diversity. So the recluse, whether he follows the path through the absolute attribute or the path through the consciousness attribute, he needs to live in a restricted field of experience. So he will live in a remote place or in a cave as a hermit with nothing to worry about or to demand his attention. In the morning and evening, he will go into samadhi, and when he comes out, he will try to live the consciousness that it has given him, using perhaps a little bit of ego, a little bit of intellect, but always as little as possible. In the world of diverse experience, with the major part of his mind involved in the business of daily life, the recluse would have no chance to live self-awareness. In fact, because of life's demands upon his attention, he could easily become vulnerable to the error of intellectual self-awareness. As soon as there is the need to immerse himself completely in some activity or occupation, then the possibility of living self-awareness is lost for the unrealized man. So of the three attributes, the bliss attribute that has been given by Maharishi is the most suitable for people who are living life in the world and who are not recluse. We do not contemplate the absolute, we do not intellectually seek consciousness or even think about it. Instead, we let the bliss attribute lead us to the experience of consciousness. We rely upon the fact that transcendental happiness is a sure attraction and lure for the mind. There exists no mind that does not feel this attraction, and just as water flows down a slope, so will the mind flow into a field of greater happiness. The mind does not need to practice, only to respond to something that is already part of and inseparable from its nature. So here we leave behind all gross experience, travel to the field of the subtlest experience, and then transcend that subtlety. And to travel it is only necessary to turn the mind inwards, towards the light of bliss happiness, and the mind will flow naturally towards it as water flows downhill. And when the mind has made its journey beyond the subtlest aspect of the manifest, when the experience of a sight, a sound, or a taste has been refined to the point of transcendence, and the experiencer is left quite alone, and this is called yoga or the samadhi. As described by Patanjali, then when the mind ceases from wandering, this is yoga, and this is the union of the lower nature with the higher nature, the union of man with God. Here, once the individual mind has reached the absolute bliss consciousness and has become one with the cosmic mind, then coming out of that state of unity, such a mind will find itself permeated by and endowed with the qualities of the cosmic mind. At first, the state will not be perfect and will not endure, but with regular practice of TM, it will come to be lived more and more for longer and longer periods. Ultimately, the state of the absolute bliss consciousness comes to be lived fully and completely in the midst of life. And when this has happened, the life of any person is brought to fruition. The life of the seeker is brought to fruition. This state is then called cosmic consciousness, and he who lives it lives a divine life in both the manifested and the unmanifested realms of creation simultaneously. That means you're living the self and the non-self. You have the experience of the self and the non-self simultaneously. Both are not lost from the view. I will just add a concluding sentence saying that I have been very fortunate that Maharishi Ji has been my guru, because in general any gurus will teach with what they have followed and where they have gained their self-realization. And so if this is not the right path for you, then it can be a very hard and difficult and sort of unsuitable path to gaining enlightenment quickly. Then I realized how important it is that you come across a guru who can give you the straight path. And the straight path is this path of bliss consciousness, because it is no path, it is a pathless path. So I have been saved. I was not influenced by any of the things that were going on around me in Tirumala or in the Himalayas. And I remained with what I have gained from Maharshi Ji. I remained with my dhyana samadhis in this blissful path and gained the ultimate reality. I will end here. Jai Gurudev. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गीतामाहात्म्यम्। गीताशास्त्रमिदं पुण्यं यः पठेत् प्रयतः पुमान् विष्णोः पदमवाप्नोति भयशोकादिवर्जितः। गीताध्ययनशीलस्य प्राणायामपरस्य च नैव सन्ति हि पापानि पूर्वजन्मकृतानि च। मलनिर्मोचनं पुंसां जलस्नानं दिने दिने सकृद्गीताम्भसि स्नानं संसारमलनाशनं। गीतासु गीता कर्तव्या किमन्यैः शास्त्रविस्तरैः या स्वयं पद्मनाभस्य मुखपद्माद्विनिसृता। भारतामृतसर्वस्वं विष्णोर्वक्त्राद्विनिसृतं। गीता गङ्गोदकं पीत्वा पुनर्जन्म न विद्यते। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः। पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। एकं शास्त्रं ते